For today's digital businesses to succeed, fast, reliable website performance is essential. But as internet traffic increases, bottlenecks can crop up, degrading performance and disrupting service. That could create serious consequences for your company as customers abandon your website and turn to competitors. But help is available through advanced load balancing technology. Hi, I'm Stan Gibson, and I'll be your host and moderator for this live interactive webcast. Joining me to explore the topic of load balancing and to tell us how one company met the challenges of optimizing performance across global servers are two experts. Christian Paulus, Head of Product Marketing at Cloudflare. Welcome, Christian. It's great to have you here for this webcast today.
Yeah, hello, this is Christian. Thanks for having me.
And Nigel Hepworth, Managing Director at Active Solutions Limited, a company that develops websites and optimizes network and server performance. Welcome, Nigel, and thanks for being with us today.
Hello, welcome. Yes, my name's Nigel Hepworth, and I'm based in the UK, so welcome to all our international listeners.
Indeed. Well, before we dive into our discussion with Christian and Nigel, just a quick word about this webcast. We are live and interactive, and we'd like to hear from you. Here's how to participate. First, send us your questions. When a question occurs to you, just type it into the Q&A box on your screen and then click Submit. We'll do our best to answer your question during the audience Q&A segment. Also, this webcast features an audience poll question. When the question appears on your screen, just select the answer that seems best and then click Submit. We'll tally and discuss the results instantly. To participate in these features, we do recommend disabling your pop-up blocker. Christian and Nigel, I know you've got some great information to share with us, so I'll hand things over to you. Christian, you're up first.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Just scooping forward to the slide here. I will start with giving a very brief overview of Cloudflare's load balancing, and then I will hand over to Nigel, and who will really go into depth in a great case study with great real journey. So Cloudflare in general accelerates and protects websites, web applications, and APIs. And to do that, we have built a global independent network. So this is a network which is available as a service, and you can set this up within less than 5 minutes. So it is very, very easy to get access to that. This is a massive network, and we are routing around 10% of the worldwide HTTP internet traffic through our data centers. It's actually, we just added a few just the last week, so it's around 115 data centers now. And so this network could sit in front of your public cloud, whether this is AWS, Azure, Google, your SaaS applications, or even your on-prem data centers. In general, we are really addressing two major challenges, and those are around performance and security. But we also provide DNS services, and we actually are by very far the largest DNS service provider globally, and we also have by far the fastest DNS service worldwide. I'm just mentioning this because load balancing, which is our topic today, is based on our DNS service, which makes load balancing and failover very, very fast. So let me start talking about some of the customer challenges we have seen, which we are trying to address with this offering. So availability and performance is clearly critical to the success of many businesses. And you know that a slow or unavailable website impacts revenue, your reputation, customer loyalty, and quite a few other issues. Let me give you some examples. Amazon.com, that's obviously a very large website, but even this went down a few times over the last few years. So 2013, the website went down for roughly 15 to 45 minutes. That's an estimated duration. And it cost Amazon 1.8 to 5.3 million in lost sales based on an average sales of about $118,000 per minute. Interestingly, Amazon also tested the impact of latency on conversion rates, and Amazon found that every 100 milliseconds in latency actually reduces sales by about 1%. This number was confirmed by Google, and Google found that latency is in the order of 100 to 400 milliseconds actually have a measurable impact on consumer behavior. So in general, we see two major types of problems, and they are around service disruptions and increased latencies. So let's talk about service disruptions first. websites, web applications, or APIs become unavailable when traffic hits unreliable or misconfigured servers, or perhaps if the web application itself has issues. Very often, there is a lack of visibility into the availability of the service, and if traffic gets routed to the unavailable service, then it often gets dropped. And as a result, the service overall is not continuously available. Let's talk about increased latency. And, it might be that the service is overutilized and then it does not perform or scale, or it might also be that traffic gets routed to geographically distant servers, and this just simply adds latencies and makes everything a little bit slower. So to address these challenges, Cloudflare introduced Cloudflare load balancing. We made this available a few weeks back to our self-serve and our enterprise customers. And in general, we address two major buckets. The first one is around health checks with fast failover, and the second is around global and local load balancing. So health checks with fast failover gives you visibility into the availability of services so that you can route traffic to only the healthy ones. We do this by active availability monitoring, and we can check the health of a server from all of the Cloudflare data centers around the globe. We do HTTPS requests to do the health checks. We can configure the monitoring for specific URLs. We can customize the intervals, the timeout, and the status codes. And we can do the checks as often as every 15 seconds. You can get reporting about the health via email notifications or also via REST APIs. The moment a server is marked as unhealthy, a failover happens typically within seconds, and we intelligently route traffic to an available server. Cloudflare load balancing is powered by Cloudflare's DNS, and I mentioned before, Cloudflare DNS is the fastest DNS provider globally. So we don't have to wait for DNS public time to live to expire. We can really migrate web host or switch over to a disaster recovery server instantaneously without really a few seconds. Let's now talk about global and local load balancing. This is really around reducing latency, and we can load balance traffic across multiple servers to improve the performance. Global load balancing allows us to route traffic to the closest geolocation region. So Cloudflare's Anycast-based content delivery network already distributes content across Cloudflare's global data centers for fast local access, but global load balancing now provides additional fine-grained control, and this is especially important for dynamic content. So for example, with global load balancing, you can ensure that dynamic content gets accessed from servers in the same geographic location as the visitor, and this really ensures fast local access for a stellar end-user experience. With load balancing, just to mention this, we support both TCP and UDP traffic, and this can be easily configured. In general, there are a couple of very strong unique benefits. The configuration is very, very simple. I mentioned before that you can sign up and set up Cloudflare, the Cloudflare network, within less than 5 minutes. And then, once you're set up and signed up, you can actually configure load balancing within a few simple clicks, also within a few minutes within a dashboard or through a powerful API. Global load balancing is also, as I mentioned before, based on DNS and our global network. And this network has about 10 times more capacity than the largest DDoS attack which has occurred so far. So it is very unlikely that even the largest DDoS attacks will topple our network and bring us down. And this ensures that we can always route traffic to available servers even under stress. And then I mentioned before, global DNS network. Again, we can do the health checks from all of our global data centers. And this is very fast because it is unbound by DNS propagation delays. So this was a very fast overview of the capabilities of Cloudflare global Cloudflare load balancing. At this point, I would like to hand over to Nigel for a very interesting and great case study around Great Rail Journey. Nigel, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm Nigel Hepworth, and I'm the Managing Director of Active Solutions Limited in the UK. You'll have to excuse me, I do have a bit of a cold at the moment, so I will continue to the best of my ability. We develop and support .NET-based websites and have a long history of developing and optimizing more complex websites like the one we're going to talk about today, Great Rail Journeys, which involves significant customer interaction and online booking. Great Rail Journeys is a UK tour operator, and they supply holidays or vacations to travellers wanting to have an escorted rail tour holiday or vacation. The site allows customers to search for and book holidays online. Let's take a look at the site as it's presented to UK customers. So we have a UK-specific site that is presented to the UK customers, and Great Rail Journeys are based in the UK. The site offers destination pages, such as this one for Italy, and a typical search result or destination choice will lead you to a page like this with information about the country. Individual tours also have their own pages, and these pages give full details of the itinerary of the holiday or vacation that is on sale to you. 2 years ago, Great Rail started boosting marketing, including TV advertising, and to ensure the site could cope, we front-ended the site with a CDN. And this one was from a different supplier to the WAF that we currently had in place to protect the site. So the previous solution, we had a number of vendors with some optimizations on the website to make best use of the CDN that we were using at the time. And we separated static and dynamic portions of pages to ensure the best performance we could. At the middle of last year, the desire to expand into the US and Canadian markets and the Australian markets in addition was raised. So we needed to make the site automatically detect the user's location and present appropriate content, as well as provide distinct content, but at the same time share the domain and web platform. This was an ideal opportunity to rationalize and review the architecture. The business requirements were that the site should share much of the content between the various market-based configurations, with separate analytics for each country, with separate marketing and tracking tags for each country variation of the website, with some automated visitor detection, and also present to the customers pricing in the local market currency. The technical requirements focused on geographic routing, caching, and ensuring high availability. And as was mentioned earlier, ensuring that we had low latency to customers wherever they may be in the US or the UK or Australia or throughout the world. So using separate suppliers for GeoDNS, WAF and CDN did not make sense and would complicate the support of the site. We also knew we needed origin servers located in the US as well as the UK to minimize the latency for US customers. And that would allow us to expand the number of locations as needed by having a more generic architecture supporting multiple origin servers fronted by a CDN. Our research led us to conclude that Cloudflare met the technical requirements, and their headers allowed us to do the visitor location detection, driving US customers to the US variant of the site, for example. The single integrated UI to manage the solution from Cloudflare and the ability to have some customization was key. For instance, we have some custom edge caching rules which ignore Google Analytics UTM_ type query string parameters on the URLs, allowing us to maximize the cache hit ratio. The Cloudflare load balancing allows the user load to be largely driven from the CDN. In fact, we made significant code changes to ensure the majority of content is cached in the CDN, controlling the CDN and browser caching entirely using server-supplied cache headers. AJAX calls from the browser are used to populate various data such as prices and availability, allowing us to achieve a very high cache hit rate. The AJAX data has a short cache time, so this means that even this AJAX data is cacheable. This can happen, for instance, after an email promotion or some other activities, marketing activities taken place where many users hit the same page. We wanted to ensure that under those scenarios, we would have a very high amount of page content delivered from the CDN. For non-cache data, this is retrieved from the closest geographic origin server, with failover to other origin servers in the case of technical issues. We use various tools to monitor the solution and worldwide response times. Some of these requests are designed to pass through the CDN, so the monitoring system is configured to bypass the CDN to allow us to monitor both the CDN response times and latency, as well as the response times and latency when we have to pass through the CDN and hit the origin servers. This allows a full monitoring solution, providing full end-to-end monitoring. The fact we've added monitoring does mean that the reported cache hit ratio within the Cloudflare portal is artificially lowered. With regards to load balancing feature, this has a number of uses, including those that it was designed for. For example, as illustrated, the UK users can be served entirely from the US origin server if two of the UK data centers become unreachable. We use the failover mechanism to aid deployments. So the master server in Crawley in the UK can be taken off air as far as Cloudflare is concerned by simply stopping the response to the monitor probe, and then we can deploy and test in that environment using local host file entries, and then bring it back online once the deployment is complete. Once Crawley is back on air, we use an automated script tool to replicate the updated site to the other origin servers, taking each origin off air in turn, as far as Cloudflare is concerned. And then once all the origins are updated, we use the API provided by Cloudflare to automatically clear the CDN cache for the pages that have been affected by the deployment. So once we had the infrastructure in place, we then moved on to developing the US version of the site, which is available on /US URL suffix on the main domain. So the CDN uses the Cloudflare headers to determine the CDN POP that's in use by the user, and that determines the content that's shown to a specific user. So in this case, a US visitor, that means they've hit a Cloudflare POP in the US, is shown the US version of the website with US phone number, prices in dollars, and tours targeted at the US market. The internationalization on the site occurs site-wide. So you'll see here on this slide on the page headers that we've changed the toll-free number to a US number. The US accreditations are displayed on the site, prices are displayed in dollars, etc., and this tour is customized in terms of the itinerary for US customers. Our expertise built up over a long period means we can deliver desktop mobile responsive site with excellent performance. And so we've used Cloudflare to augment the technology that we have to ensure that we maximize the delivery of the system. So just to recap, we automatically detect the visitor location using Cloudflare response headers, i.e. which POP is serving the content to the user. We've got a highly optimized content and site structure designed to maximize caching, which we'll come on to in a moment. All of the CDN caching is controlled by response headers delivered from the web server. This avoids having to do any complex configuration or page rules at Cloudflare means that the configuration is driven dynamically on a page-by-page and content-by-content item basis. And we've used mobile optimizations and other techniques within Cloudflare to ensure a performant mobile site as well. So just to demonstrate how successful that we have been using these technologies with Cloudflare's Assistant, we use a system called Uptrends, a global monitoring system, and monitor site performance. And we've got a sub 2 second average response time for the pages on a worldwide basis. Talking about the project timeline for the delivery of this system. So we started the site development last March, and by October we had the new site designed and ready to go. And we, on the 28th of October, we selected Cloudflare. So to demonstrate how quick it was to implement Cloudflare, by the 9th of November, we'd launched the UK site using a front end from Cloudflare. We then did some further site optimizations, including allowing us to pick up the data from Cloudflare as to where the POP was located that was delivering the content to the user. And on the 24th of November, we had our international site go live with full load balancing. So it was a very short time window of less than a month to add the Cloudflare load balancing and deliver some further optimizations to make the best use of Cloudflare. The results are excellent. We have a high degree of caching. As I said before, even this is understated. So we have 92% of all of the data that's delivered to the end users is delivered from a Cloudflare POP. So even under very high stress on the from a user perspective, our origin servers are seeing very little of that load directly. Cloudflare is fully protecting our origin servers using Cloudflare WAF, and the origin servers themselves are firewalled so that only Cloudflare POPs can access our origin servers. So we've tried to make the best use we can and full use of all of the facilities available to Cloudflare. We have high availability with origin server failover, so even if one of our 3 origin servers or 2 of our origin servers go down, we expect to continue to deliver the full customer experience on the website. Our experience is that the Cloudflare solution does work well. By optimizing the code and maximizing the use of facilities that Cloudflare offers, we've managed to deliver a high degree of cacheability and a very efficient system. The failover is used to not only provide for server failure, but to aid our deployments. And the use of the APIs allows us to automate the deployment beyond the first server. We've made additional use of the Cloudflare optimizations for mobile devices, such as mobile image optimization. And there's some other things that we are looking to implement using Cloudflare, the HTML minification, and providing, when it becomes available, the use of sticky sessions. So, Stan, if I can return to you.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Nigel, for a great explanation of your specific use of Cloudflare. That's going to bring us now to our audience poll question, and that question will be appearing on your screen momentarily. Well, the question is, what are your main challenges you would like to address with Cloudflare load balancing? And you've got 4 choices: local load balancing, global load balancing or geolocation steering, failover, or health checks. So please make your selection from those 4 choices, hit the submit button, and we'll look at the results in just a few seconds. Now, Christian and Nigel, I know you're familiar with these technologies very closely. All of them are very, very important. Do you have any thoughts as to which one we might see the greatest response for in this poll?
Yeah, I actually would think that global load balancing probably will top the charts here this time. This has been the case for most of the customer discussions I had, and also with the kind of surveys we have done. But these other capabilities are also very important. So local load balancing obviously is important, as we mentioned before, to really distribute traffic across multiple servers to reduce latency. And of course, failover is just always important to ensure availability. And health checks, it's kind of a built-in kind of capability to support these other things, but you can also kind of use this if you use a little bit workarounds as a standalone probe. So it's also kind of an interesting capability on itself. I mean, Nigel, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I mean, I would say that the global load balancing and geolocation steering is probably going to be the most popular feature because, as Christian pointed out earlier, Amazon, Google, and other people tell us we've got to reduce the latency between the user and the content. So the only way you can do that is by having a CDN with local POPs and then having a origin service served more closely to the local POPs on a global basis in order to minimize the latency for end users on a global basis.
All right. I wonder if we might give our audience just a few more seconds to vote. Perhaps people are making up their minds still. Give them just a few more seconds to vote for one of those four options: local load balancing, global load balancing, geolocation steering, failover, or health checks. And while we're waiting for our audience to vote, I might just remind members of our audience to please send us your questions. Nigel and Christian would be happy to answer them. Just type them into the Q&A box on your screen and hit the submit button. All right, well, let's take a look at our poll results at this point. And we find that local load balancing with 60% is the winner, but significant representation also for global load balancing and geolocation steering, as well as for health checks. Maybe a slight surprise there, Christian? What do you think?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at it. So local load balancing, 60%. So that's actually very high. Failover, 0. So that's really surprising. Because I think, most of the results I've seen so far, failover and local load balancing was kind of sharing, kind of similar, and then global load balancing was kind of topping the list. But it always really depends on the use case scenarios of customers. So if you, for example, have a site which, for example, we have one of our customers is a monetary exchange. And so for them, it is very important to really have responsive servers and distribute traffic to make sure that trading can occur and really at low latencies. And for them, local load balancing is the most important and critical capability. So I'm a little bit surprised of this result, but that's still interesting. I'm surprised that no one has voted for failover here, though.
Yes, I mean, this seems to indicate that the audience are looking to add load balancing to provide more capability to deliver a load, in that they need to add more local servers in order to cater to demand. Now, architecturally, the CDN is the place to offload the load to. Adding more servers and load balancing is relatively inefficient, and so I'm quite surprised about that, because the fact we've got no failover means that they're just trying to add more capacity at the origin end and balance the incoming load across those servers, whereas perhaps a use of a CDN and better optimizations would reduce the amount of load balancing that they need to do.
All right. Well, let's move ahead to our audience Q&A. If you haven't sent us a question yet, there's still time to do so. Just type it into the Q&A box, hit submit, and we'll answer it if we possibly can. Our first question is, how fast do we fail over? And Nigel, I'm wondering if I might direct this one to you. You could perhaps elaborate a little bit on the speed that you experienced failover.
Yes. Well, as was discussed earlier, the probes hit the origin server, and those occur every 15 seconds. And our experience is that, certainly, by the time the next poll, once you've had a failed poll, the traffic stops being delivered to that origin server. So failover is literally, 15 to 30 seconds, and we've failed over onto a working node. And we do test this quite regularly because, as I pointed out in my presentation, we stop our ability to respond to the monitor probes in order to do deployments on our primary origin server. So we do test this on a weekly basis, and it is exceedingly fast. That is the failover.
Yeah, from my side, I can really confirm this. I'm really happy with the fast failover we provide. So our company-wide internal SLA is actually 30 seconds, but in reality, the failover occurs much faster. So on average, what we see in our customer dashboards, it is typically 10 seconds or less. And it's often averages around 7 seconds, but it's often less than 10 seconds. So gray clouded load balancing may be a little bit slower due to DNS resolver caching records for longer than expected, but that's of course outside of our control.
I see. Well, that brings us to our second question, and that does in fact relate to gray clouded records. And the question is, does load balancing work for gray clouded records too?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And so we can health check, failover, and geosteer traffic for gray clouded resources, which means we can do this for protocol services beyond what we can just proxy. So load balancing is DNS based, which makes it very flexible.
All right, next question. Is it possible to just set up health checks?
Yeah, technically yes. You can do this by just setting up a pool of origins, and then we will health check them automatically. And it's today it's a bundled functionality, but again, this way we can actually just do the health check as well.
I see. All right. Many of our companies are global today, and I'm sure members of our audience, many of them are global as well. So our next question is, does load balancing work in China?
Yeah, very good question. So we also have a very big China network, and so that's a strong value prop Cloudflare also provides. Many businesses are also expanding into China, and China is obviously a huge internet market. And so load balancing at the moment does not quite work for China, but we are working on this, and I can't give you a timeline on this quite yet, but the expectation is that this will be available also within a short time frame.
All right, it looks like we have time for one more question, and the question is, what is the pricing for load balancing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, if you look at our plans page, then you see that we are very much changing our pricing over the last few months. In the past, we had a very simple pricing which was based on plans, and now we're also moving more to consumption-based pricing and pricing based on add-ons. And so add-ons these are functionalities customers can purchase individually on top of the plans. So this gives a lot of flexibility to really configure towards the specific needs of customers, and also only pay for what you really want to consume rather than paying a higher price for a bundle of stuff you might not want to use. In general, we have a strong policy around flat rate pricing, which means that you wouldn't pay for attack traffic, and that's also the case here. But the pricing we have for load balancing actually is a mix of two components. So there is a base fee, which is $5, which includes two origins with 60 seconds health checks from one location. And then there is a consumption-based component. And this consumption-based component is, we are providing here 500,000 DNS requests for free. And so the consumption metric is DNS requests because that's the most natural way to measure the value of this. And then every consecutive bracket of 500,000 DNS requests would be 50 cents. And so if you look at this consumption-based pricing, this is, I think, a very good approach because it really makes load balancing and very advanced capabilities available to user and customer segments who never before were really able to get access to these capabilities because they were too expensive. So I come from the enterprise world. I worked with the largest enterprise companies, and and I'm used to hundred millions of dollars bills for these kind of technologies, and now we can get access to this for $5 or for just a few cents. So this is very amazing in my opinion, but it's also very fair because customers really only pay for what they consume, and so if you consume more, you pay more. If you consume less, you actually pay less. And on top of this, there are a couple of other capabilities. Then there's a small add-on charge, if you need more origins, if you want a higher frequency of health checks, if you want the number of health checks, the higher the number of locations from which you do the health checks. And then there is also an additional fee for the global load balancing for the geo-based routing. So it gets a little bit more complex than what we had before, but it's a very fair model, and again makes it available to customers who could never really get access to these advanced capabilities before.
I see. Well, thanks very much, Christian. That is all the time we have in this live and interactive webcast. Sincere thanks to our two experts, Christian Paulus, Head of Product Marketing at Cloudflare, and Nigel Hepworth, Managing Director at Active Solutions Limited. Thanks to both for explaining how Cloudflare load balancing can clear up performance bottlenecks and assure optimal website performance. For additional information on this topic, please click on the green resources icon on your screen. And thanks for joining us. For Cloudflare and IDG, I'm Stan Gibson.